Hello and welcome to this webinar on hybrid cloud design considerations. My name is David Boyd and I am an enterprise architect for Glasshouse Technologies UK Limited. There is a lot of hype in the media at the moment about hybrid clouds, and that is driven mostly by the fact that for most organisations a single public or a single private cloud solution is unlikely to meet the needs of that business. But what applications and what cloud types? And this is what I've termed the cloud dilemma, that we know that not all applications are suitable for a public or indeed for a hybrid cloud, and not all cloud types are right for that application. For example, if you have an application with a very predictable and steady workload profile, it is best hosted in a private cloud environment. Why? Because public clouds, as a rule of thumb, tend to be more expensive over time. Conversely, an application with a very sporadic, unpredictable or spiky workload profile is likely to be better placed in a public cloud. In a private cloud, the application owner would have to cater for those spikes in usage by provisioning additional infrastructure. In the public cloud, the responsibility for providing that infrastructure falls to the service provider. An analogy for this would be car ownership. If you use a car every day, let's say for commuting, it is best to own that car. However, if you only need a car once a month, let's say if you're going away for the weekend, hiring a car is significantly cheaper. In the same way, the pay-as-you-go offerings from the cloud providers offer a cost-effective alternative to purchasing and managing unused infrastructure. So how do we make these cloud decisions? How do we determine the why and what in which and how? Well, the answer is we build a cloud strategy. And the first part of that cloud strategy is getting a thorough understanding of your applications. So firstly, have a look at a technical level at the infrastructure that supports your applications. Have a look at the servers, their hardware. Have a look at the operating system, remembering that not every operating system type is supported in all public cloud environments. Have a look at what application code you're using. Have a look at what storage supports and holds your data. Have a look at the networking and the load balancing and the firewalls and security that govern that, and have a look at the data protection. Build that whole picture of what the supporting infrastructure underneath your application. Once you've got that, you need to have a look at the workload profiles. Now this is very important to understand what bits of your infrastructure are doing what. Now there are a plethora of different tools that can help you monitor workload profile and display that graphically. In an ideal world, you'd let that run for a long period of time. So if you're monitoring your workload for a day, that's not enough. A week is better. A month is good. A quarter probably ideal. A year probably unfeasible, but better still. But if you don't run it for the whole of a market cycle, you need to be aware that outside of your monitoring period things may change. So for example, if you record the workload profile of a retail application in July, you'll get a very different profile to how the same recording would look if you took it in the run up to Christmas. So where you're not looking at your entire market cycle, you need to take that into account and extrapolate or project the data you collect to cater for any additional spikes. Have a look at the compliance. Are there any regulatory restrictions that might stop you moving an application to a cloud? Maybe it can't be hosted in a particular geography, or maybe it has to be hosted in a particular geography. Linked to that, have a look at security. Are there any security requirements that are specific to this application? What are the impact levels perhaps that govern it? Does it need to sit on infrastructure and a data center that's accredited to a certain level? At this stage it's also worth looking at the inter-application dependencies. If you have two applications that communicate with each other, if you move one of those applications into a different environment, into a cloud, does that impact the second application? Perhaps there is a latency sensitive link between the two applications, or maybe they pass large volumes of data between the two and therefore bandwidth needs to be taken into consideration. Similarly, look at the user to application interaction. Again, latency and bandwidth restrictions. What you don't want to do is move an application to a cloud and then find that user experience has been adversely impacted, because then your change will not be accepted. Take a look at the political sensitivity. Have you got anyone on the board who have a particularly strong feeling for or against some hosting solution? Finding out whether you have any potential blockers may save you a lot of time in the long run. Have a look at the service level agreements that govern your application. Make sure you understand what your recovery point objective is, your recovery time objective, what the availability SLAs are, and how long data needs to be retained for. Have a look at how feasible a migration to a cloud might be. You should be able to, at this stage, look at your application and have a feel for how complex a migration might be. An incredibly complicated migration could cost you so much money that actually the return on investment is so long that moving to a public or hybrid cloud is not going to be worth it. So it's good to get a feel for that early on. And while you're looking at costs, look at the current costs of management and support, and of the capex costs and the hardware and the software that you're purchasing. It may be that moving to a cloud will increase or even decrease management costs, whichever way it does, but that information will really feed into a business case later on. Have a look at the skills of the staff that support your applications. It might be that the skills are very bespoke and therefore only available in-house. Similarly, it could be that they're reasonably generic, and actually moving to a supported solution elsewhere enhances the service that you can offer your customers. And finally, take a look at your private cloud infrastructure. Take a look at its suitability and longevity. If your data center is falling apart or your rental agreement is coming to an end, that might actually be a good incentive to accelerate a cloud strategy. So that's just some of the information that you should be collecting. And really, I can't stress enough that the more information you collect, the better your cloud strategy will be. Now, the next step in building your cloud strategy is to analyze that data and determine which applications are suited to which particular cloud model. So application A, is it best suited to, say, infrastructure as a service, or platform as a service, or software as a service? And really, if you've got a lot of information from your discovery phase, this stage will be relatively simple. It will become relatively obvious which cloud model is best suited for your application. Once you've done that, you need to justify your strategy, and you do that with a business case, or indeed a business justification for change if you're not going to do a full financial business case. Once you've got that approved, you've got the funding to implement your project, we need to build a roadmap for change. So, we developed our cloud strategy, we justified it through the business case, and we got approval, so now we move on to the execution stage. And I put here three key stages to the execution: the design and implementation of a private cloud, the selection of public vendors, and the contracting of terms. So the first one here, design and implementing the private cloud. Remember, in a hybrid cloud, the private cloud is likely to be half of the solution, so you need to implement a private cloud if you haven't already got one. And there are a number of tools out there or software stacks that you can use to build your private cloud, including open source options from the likes of OpenStack, OpenNebula, or CloudStack. But really, you need to choose the software type that is right for you based upon the requirements that your private cloud has and the skills of the staff that are going to support it. The second step, or in parallel really, you want to be selecting your public cloud vendor or vendors, and this might just be a single vendor, or perhaps multiple ones, or even a cloud broker through which you can get access to a range of offerings from several different service providers. And once you've got that, you need to contract the terms with your public cloud provider. And of particular importance in the contracting of terms is to make sure that all the service level agreements that you identified during your discovery exercise are translated and documented into your contract, and that there are appropriate penalties or service credits or however you want to do it built into that contract, so that if things do go wrong, if there is an outage, that you are compensated for that outage. I wanted to spend the rest of the presentation talking about some hybrid cloud architectures, and the first one here is a very basic deployment. We've got an on-premise private cloud with some applications running within it, and a public cloud. What we haven't got is any interaction or integration between these two cloud platforms. That means if I wanted to move some of my applications from my private to my public cloud, I would have to uninstall them from one and reinstall them in the other. This time-consuming exercise doesn't offer the organisation the flexibility that cloud promises, and strictly speaking doesn't adhere to the definition of hybrid. A much better way is to link your clouds together at an API level. So like before, we have our private cloud on-premise with some applications running on it, and we have our public cloud. Only this time we've linked them together at an API level. Rather than uninstall and reinstall our applications, we can now move our applications dynamically between the clouds, offering the flexibility and the agility that the business demands. There are, however, some limitations to this solution. There aren't any standards between cloud operating systems, and therefore the easiest way to configure this architecture is to run the same cloud operating system in both your private and your public environment, which really does limit you to the number of public services that you can use. A better way still is to use a brokered and managed solution. So here, like before, we've got our on-premise private cloud with some applications, and we've got our public cloud. But here I've added a community cloud and an outsourced private cloud as well. These four clouds sit within a brokered cloud environment. When users want to deploy services to a cloud, they go to the broker to get access to the clouds rather than going to each individual cloud in turn. Also, if we want to move applications from one cloud to another, we do this through the tools in the broker, allowing us to move our applications dynamically between cloud types, but more importantly, dynamically between cloud types of different technology sets. This gives us enormous flexibility and enormous agility. It also allows us to optimize our costs. For example, if the public cloud provider was to drop his prices, we could take advantage of that decrease in prices by moving our applications and our services to that cloud. If those prices go back up, we can rapidly move them back out into a more cost-effective place. It also empowers users. The users going to a broker get access to multiple different clouds, giving them much more choice about where they want their applications to be deployed. And then governance and reporting can be improved by adding in a cloud management platform to really report on what's happening and the usage of your brokered environment. So to summarize, there are 4 steps to building your hybrid cloud solution. Firstly, you need to define your cloud strategy, and as we discussed, that's really underpinned by a deep understanding of the current state of your applications. Then you need to go on to implement your private cloud and select a public cloud service provider. And finally, you need to connect those clouds together with either a gateway or a broker. And really, it's only at this point when you connect the clouds together that you form hybrid clouds. Thank you for listening to this webinar on hybrid cloud. If you'd like to learn more about how Glasshouse can help you define, design and execute a cloud strategy, go to www.glasshouse.com or email sales@glasshouse.com. Thank you again.